Hi everyone, I'm Barbara Beck and I'm here at First Baptist Church of Orlando for a special Welcome Home show today. This is their Sensational Seniors celebration of mature adults, senior citizens, and it is a wonderful time and has been. But this program today, we have found a comedian that you are going to know. You probably already know and love him. Dr. Dennis Swanberg is in the house. He's going to make you laugh. He might make you cry. I don't know, but I do know this. You need to stay with us for a wonderful program. Hi everyone, you are in for a big treat today. I have with us here on Welcome Home, Dr. Dennis Swanberg. We're here at First Baptist Church of Orlando at their Sensational Seniors Mature Adult Celebration, and boy have we been celebrating, and we're getting ready to do some more celebrating right now with you, Dr. Swanberg.
Well, they're going to have the old swan, and you know,
the swan's in the house.
We're going to have a good time.
That's
Baby
right.
boomers, boomers, super boomers. It's boom or bust. You know, we're going to have a good time.
When did you find out that you were funny?
Well, you know, I was the class clown growing up.
Were you?
Since first grade, but I was probably about my junior, senior year in high school. I could imitate my coaches and imitate the principal, and so, you know, I was always having fun in the locker room doing that. And then our football team back then, Reagan High School, Austin, Texas. We were state champs. We beat Odessa Permian on Friday Night Lights.
Congratulations!
You know,
wow.
Now they got
That's
a television
awesome.
show.
I know.
You know, we were pretty good, and so at the football banquet, our coach, the lieutenant governor, was going to speak, but he asked me to come up and do a few funnies to lighten everybody up a little bit. So I got up there. And I was doing my impersonations I did back then. Howard Cosell, no doubt about it. What about smoking JoJo, Frazier, Muhammad? I'm tired of, I want Frazier. I'm going to get him. I'm the greatest. I look good. Frazier's ugly. I mean, I was just doing all that stuff. And Monday Night Football, Lenny Dawson back to pass. He throws the bomb to Tess Taylor. And so then I do my Barney Fife. Has anybody seen Thelma Lett? And I do all that kind of stuff.
I love it. Well, you have a Bill Clinton. Please don't leave us with that.
Bill Clinton was sort of way back there. Probably wasn't known then, but I was on my way. But from Hope, Arkansas. But, and by the way, hey, pray for Hillary, okay? I mean, but do not email her. Pray for her, but do not email her. She's having a hard time with her emails.
She can't get those emails figured out.
So I do these voices, and everybody laughed. And one reason I think they laughed was because the lieutenant governor at the time was under indictment for some kind of fraud. And so the mamas were all upset that he's going to speak to our boys. But the coaches didn't want to uninvite him, because that's not politically correct in Texas,
yeah,
you know, circles of football and politics. So they weren't going to uninvite him. So that's why I think he had me get up. And Coach was, you know, he was smart, because everybody,
it lightened the mood.
They laughed so hard. And the next day, in the paper, Austin American Statesman, in big bold letters, it says Swanberg steals show.
Oh.
And so all of a sudden I thought, I guess I can be funny.
I think you made it.
I guess I can do it. And I have one picture. Someone took a picture of that, and from that moment on, I knew that I could make people laugh. I didn't know why. I didn't understand the, you know, timing and punchline and this and that. But I knew I could do it.
And God had given you that gift.
So I went on to Baylor and surrendered to the call of ministry. Well, then all of a sudden, you know, they were wanting me to do youth banquets and Valentine banquets and youth camps, all because I could be that funny and keep their attention.
Yeah. And no time for preaching anymore.
And I do a little preaching, you know. Sort of like now, I still preach somewhere every Sunday, but afterwards, I'll always have that sweet little lady come out to the, you know, shake my hand and go, I enjoyed your thing. I went, well, ma'am, I don't call it preaching either, but. You know, I tell people if I'd preached that way at the seminary, I'd made an F, but I've made a lot of money doing it that way.
That's
so
right.
I said I'm going with the money.
Well, don't you find it really interesting, Dennis, what people will remember from a message? Because I've done that. I've told silly stories about rats and strangest things, and then I get to the meat of what I'm going to be talking about, and I think somebody will come up to me and say, thank you so much for that very strong message. No, I love the story about the rat, you know?
Well, you know, that's why I think Jesus, the Bible says, he always spake them a parable. In the King Jimmy, he spake them a parable. Well, he told a story. Now, the Pharisees and scribes didn't like that. They wanted him to go verse by verse. but he knew that people would remember a story. And so he always told a story. And so I'm a storyteller. Then I intersperse it with voice impersonations and try to slip that gospel message in there where they can digest it, sort of set that hook without ripping it out of their lip, you know. And so I've accomplished it all with a little humor. And you know, the scripture is true. There's Ecclesiastes, there's a time for tears, there's a time for laughter. If you live long enough, and so like when I'm doing the senior adults events, we've lived long enough to cry plenty.
Yes.
So if you get a chance to laugh, you ought to laugh a little bit, lighten up. And as old Mr. Haney on Green Acres will say, sometimes you just gotta lighten up and just enjoy the moment. And as Billy Graham would say, and the scripture even says, a merry heart is good like a medicine. And if you don't have a merry heart, well then your bones can become weary, and then they break, and then you can't walk or run, and then you got to take Boniva for bone density. Barbara Boniva.
I'm about ready for some
Sally
Boniva.
Fields takes Boniva.
That's right.
I'll tell you what I do for my bone density. Bluebell ice cream. Oh my gosh, Bluebell is back. It's making it come back, and as Bill Clinton would say, I'm so happy.
You talk about life-changing stories. We love to tell the stories here on Good Life 45. Who is and what is the story of Dr. Dennis Swanberg? Start out when you were this little boy.
Well, you know, my mom and dad, they were great people. We were good Methodist. We're Swedish. My grandparents all came, you know, basically came from, my grandpa Swanberg came from Sweden when he was 14. My other three grandparents were born east of Austin, Texas, in a little community called New Sweden, right after they got there. And so I'm a svenska pojke, I'm a Swedish boy. And so we were working people. I tell people we weren't white collar, we weren't blue collar, we were more ring around the collar. And you know, my dad wore a Dickie shirt and Dickie pants to work every day. And he was a printer, printing presses, and did it for 45 years, same place. And
solid people.
So I was an athlete, and our high school football chaplain, his name was Marshall Edwards, and we called him Rabbi. He was a Baptist, and he was 32, but I sort of thought he was old, you know.
Yeah.
But I saw something in him, and after we won our third state championship, and after I did that banquet, spoke at that banquet, with his influence, I gave my life to Christ, and next thing I knew, he took me. I had football scholarships at other places, but I decided he took me to Baylor. And so I was going to go to Baylor and play baseball, and he sort of orchestrated all that. Well then, when I got to Baylor, then in November he came up there to pastor at Columbus Avenue Baptist Church. And I didn't know about how Baptists would steal a preacher from one church to another. And when he came up there, I said, well, you know what, he's done so much for me, I'm joining up. So I walked the aisle, and he told me I needed to be baptized. And I said, a little dab will do you. And he said, a little dab won't do you here. And I said, what do y'all do? He said, we put you under till you bubble. And actually, he put me under, wouldn't let me up till I said tithe. You know, that'll bless your heart. So, but anyhow, then in the spring he asked me to be his youth pastor. Well, all I knew was Jesus. I didn't know a whole lot, but he grew me along. And
so he mentored you. You had a serious mentor.
He's my father in the ministry.
Right.
And then I went to seminary and pastored churches and did that for 24 years. But in 1995, I decided to leave the pastorate to do this full time. I'd watched, you know, Jerry Clowers and Grady Nutt and those guys, and I wondered, could I do that? And my church commissioned me into the ministry of encouragement, and they were so good and gracious. After I resigned from the church, Dr. Dobson put my cassette tape on the radio, and boy, that doesn't hurt you.
You're dating yourself now here with those cassette tapes.
And then he played the other half of it a month later, and then he and Miss Shirley came and heard me over here in Sarasota, Florida.
Is that right?
6 months later. And he told me, he said, came up after the service, says, Swanee, I want everything you got. Wow. And I hated to tell him, you got everything I got, that one cassette tape.
That was it.
So I spoke in the Greek future tense. I said, well, I'll get to you my other materials in the near future. And so that meant I went home and created some stuff. And so over these years, dozens and dozens and dozens of times I've done stuff for Dr. Dobson.
That's so cool.
And just most recently, a year ago, I went out there and he wanted to do an interview with me about my book, Planting Shade Trees.
I was just going to ask you about your book.
It's a good little old book about encouraging folks to realize that everyone can leave a legacy, everybody, and not just the legends. And so, anyhow, I've been preaching it for 30 years and finally put it in a book form. And he had just finished his book on legacy. Well, it ended up, they aired it on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday on Family Talk. And on Wednesday, it was just Doc and I talking for 30 minutes about it. And then he played me doing the whole routine of shade trees on Thursday and Friday. So once again, you know, here he is helping me. And Dr. Stanley, he loves the book, and Dr. Jeremiah, they were, because I do these fundraisers, and I just try to encourage people that when you give your tithe, when you give your offering, when you give of your time and your talents, and when you pray, and when you're planting a shade tree. See, my great-grandpa, when he came from Sweden, he built the house. I drove out there yesterday. I was in Austin, Texas yesterday. I drove my mama, she's 86. We went out there and we drove up and looked at the house. My great-grandpa, he planted shade trees around the house because east of Austin was just prairie land. Well, when he was 40, he died, but my grandpa was 5 years old, but he planted shade trees that he never sat under. But my grandpa did, my mother did, I have, my boys have. You get the picture.
Absolutely.
And so I use different trees, you know, from each chapter has a different tree, like the Muir Woods out there at Golden Gate. You were in
we were there
California.
yesterday, yes.
But the Muir Woods, they're over 1,000 years old.
Yes.
Well, how have they made it? Well, their roots shake hands with each other. They hold each other up. And God's people, we hold each other up. And we don't quit planting shade trees until the day we die.
What do you say about the oak tree? Because we have so many oak trees in Florida.
I love oak trees. Well, I put one in there about, in Austin, Texas, we had the treaty oak. It was a part of 12 oak trees. They called them the council, the council of 12. But over the years, just one remains. It's over 500 years old. And the folklore and all is, you know, that Santa Ana was underneath that tree, you know, when he signed the deal with Texas and the Indians. And some years ago, a dude poisoned it. And he put enough poison in there to kill 100 oaks that would have been 500 years old, is what the tree doctors tell us. So what the Texans did is they drilled holes into the root system, and they pumped in pure sugar. And then they watered it with Texas spring water, and then they sprayed it with Texas spring water, and it survived. 7 years later, it produced acorns again. They sent the acorns all over the world to be planted. And so the thought of that chapter is sometimes shade tree planters need to add sweetness and kindness. Those oak trees, they just don't grow overnight. And they're awesome.
And I knew sugar was good for something. They keep saying
pumped in pure sugar.
So Dennis Swanberg, if you were to look back on your life, because you've had a very productive life. You have a legacy that you've already left. You've got a lot of years still ahead of you. But if you were to have one regret in life, what would that regret be? And maybe you don't have one.
Well, you know, I have two boys. They're 33 and 30. Sometimes you have thoughts of that I wasn't at home as much as I should be. You know, they've had their bumps in the road, and so the first thing you think about is, you know, maybe I should have stayed in the pastorate. Maybe I should have never gone on the road. But you know, pastors have trouble with kids, and they're there. And some people have trouble with their kids, and they're there all the time. But, you know, I have evaluated my parenting skills, and I wasn't as good a dad as my dad. My dad was, you know, tougher. I was too much the enabler. But, you know, the encouragement I would give to other folks, because I'm 62, and as I reflect back, did some things right and some things wrong, but I try to remind myself and others that Adam and Eve had a perfect father and they had a perfect world.
And look at them.
But they had a mind of their own.
There you go.
And their two boys, well, one of them killed the other one.
Yeah.
But, you know, God didn't just throw in the towel and say, well, let's scrap all this, you know, forget it. You know, he was patient, loving all these years. Yeah. So therefore, if he's a good Heavenly Father, as a father, I need to go on loving my boys.
Absolutely.
I need to go on loving people and family that have bumps in the road or tough times. And so, you know, I've learned that it's not always just about was I there enough or this or that. We all fail, but I think the real thing I would think about and remind people is that we should pray more, and that the prayers of a righteous man availeth much. Right. So I tweak that and try to say the prayers of a righteous dad availeth much.
That's
the prayers
exactly
of a righteous mom or the righteous grandpa or the righteous grandma. You know, if we want our prayers to be effective, we need to ask ourselves, how are we doing? How are we living this Christian life? And so I guess if I had an ultimate regret was maybe I didn't pray as much as I ought to.
Well, I appreciate your candor and your honesty, because really, truthfully, we all have regrets in life. When I ask that question and somebody will say, oh, I have no regrets because if I hadn't done this, I wouldn't be here. Well, you know, none of us has lived a perfect life, and God restores what the locust has eaten.
Yeah, that's true.
So I can totally see God working in and through you with your sons and with your people in your circles of influence. So, you know, we just have to believe that God is faithful. But I love the analogy with
he is.
Adam and
you know,
Eve.
He's and you know, I think we need to be a little more transparent sometimes on the stage or in the pulpit, not to grandstand or not just to create a new routine or a new message or so we can have a new book or a new.
Although that's not all bad either.
You know. All that, you know. but I think, you know, I heard a professor one time say, and he said, if we're going to help people who are bleeding, we have to be willing to hemorrhage ourselves. Now you have to control that hemorrhaging. But you know, sometimes I don't always see a lot of bleeding from the stage or the pulpit or from the Sunday school teacher or the leader.
And you know, not they all have it.
Not that you have to just, you know, grandstand it, but I tell grandparents, for instance, and I'm not a grandparent yet, but I think grandparents should talk to their grandkids more and give them a little bit below the iceberg. Let them know some of your where things
struggles.
Weren't your struggles and where you weren't perfect, because I think kids listen to their grandparents more than they listen to their parents. And if they can just let them know, hey, you know, that things happen, but you keep on keeping on and be all that God wants you to be. It's a journey. It's a marathon. And you know, I think that's important.
You know, Dennis, I like to read out of one of my devotionals is Streams in the Desert.
Oh, yeah.
And that is talking about all of the trials and the low times that we go to. And one of the devotions I read recently talked about the angel of pain. Pain is terrible. Sorrow is terrible. Depression, all these things are terrible. But the angel part of it means that we're being ministered to, and then we go out and minister to others from that. You know, when a pastor tells you that, you know, I struggle with depression, or a pastor tells you that you know, pornography is a part of his life, and you know, most of them won't tell you that, but one out of every few, I want to say every 3 or 4 men struggles with that. And so I think it's real important to be transparent. And I appreciate you being that with us today.
I think when you do that, you sort of pop the bubble of the fantasy, and the fantasy goes away. I'm working on a new book, but it's a hard one that I'm trying to get completed, but it's about, you know, silence is the enemy of healing, and secrets make you sick.
Wow.
And then sick people are attracted to other sick people. And that doesn't make anything better. You know, sometimes I think, well, I got baggage, you got baggage, but I want to share that just to let folks know that when I'm encouraging and it's fun and uplifting, I have to always remember, my preaching professor said, always remember when that people out there are hurting. Someone's hurting. And so I thought, if I can have something to let them know a little bit about my story, my boys. You know, my youngest boy, he'll be sober 8 years in December.
Praise God.
He's married, got married in August, and
Well, you got some potential for grandbabies.
Oh yeah, he's a counselor, you know, and counsels folks with addictions. And so, you know, I tell people, I said, you know, I don't get weary behind my eyeballs, you know, but the Lord's renewing my strength.
Right.
So it takes the wind out of you.
Yeah.
And my oldest son as well, but he's doing good. But you know, that's just part of life.
That's
but right when you think that you're pretty holy and pretty good, and like, well, I never did any of that, I was a good boy, blah, blah, blah. Well, the reality is the Lord says, well, have you ever hurt me? And I go, well, yes, sir. Well, then hush, because we're all recovering from something.
Don't you think that when you do your comedy shtick, that there is a lot of it's a lot of who you are, and you can tell the truth in comedy? Do you see yourself doing that? You
can do that, and it helps people. They can digest it better.
Yeah.
You know, whenever if I mention something like that, Dusty, and my boys have given me, you know, permission. You know, if all of a sudden I mention, you know, about Dusty, like last night I was in Georgetown, Texas, and I was speaking to the folks there. Well, just down the street was the jail that Dusty spent 9 days in for a DUI, way back there.
Yeah.
Well, as soon as I just shared a little bit of that, the whole room changed. You know, the whole room changed.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, you know, I laugh. Well, now he's married. And Brittany's a wonderful gal. She's a dog trainer. They have 2 mastiffs and a boxer, and if they don't move unless she tells them to, and verbal or hand. So we're praying now that she'll train Dusty.
Yeah.
And so.
Well, she's going to have some good kids too.
Yeah.
They'll have great kids one day. If she
you
can do
know,
that.
so then we laugh.
Yeah.
But then and we laughed and we had a great time last night, and we're gonna. But they know that. Dennis is just like them. I'm no different than them. None of us are. Every preacher I watch preach, I don't care who he is, because I'm a man, I know how he thinks. I know his struggles. None of us are, you know, have got it together. We're all on a journey.
Jesus tells us, in this world you will have trouble. We've all got it, you know, and I pretend. I like to not let people think I'm pretending with this facade. I tell them, in my world, I have trouble. You know, there are relationship troubles, there are health trouble, there are issues in all of our lives. And I think that people like to see perfection, but it doesn't exist.
Yeah. But, you know, on the other hand, it's good to be able to preach and teach and share that you can have victory.
That's right.
There are ways
in spite of us.
Yeah, there are ways of escape. There is a way where we don't have to habitually be tied down to sin or this or that. So that's why Jesus came. So there's victory, and there's joy, there's an abundant life. So it's not just hey, let's all build a testimony. You know.
Right.
You know, I asked my boys one time, I said, are you trying to build a testimony? Are you going into evangelism or something, and you feel like you got to have something?
Enough already, right?
You know?
Enough. So tell me what your favorite comedy routine would be. Do you like talking about sports? Do you like the impersonations the best? What's your favorite thing to talk about?
I love telling church stories. You know, I was in the local church 24 years. I only lasted like 4 years at every church. You know, I was usually a transition guy.
Well, you're
at every
Methodist,
church.
right?
But
that was even in Baptist?
Yeah, I became Baptist in college, so I was never a Methodist pastor.
But they moved those Methodists around,
yeah, but
right?
I was a Baptist and all these years, and so I was there 4 years, and if the kitchen got a little hot, I got out of the kitchen. You know,
You're smart.
You know, when you asked about any regrets, sometimes I tell preachers, sometimes you need to go through the fire.
Yeah.
I was the type, if a kitchen got a little hot, you know,
you're out of there.
I'm gonna go to another place.
Yeah.
You know?
Would you call that being an ostrich? Do you put your head in the sand?
Well, I think that's just trying to, you know, some of us are a little narcissistic, and we want everybody to praise us and to like us, and we don't want to always go through the fire.
Yeah.
But sometimes a pastor has to go through the fire.
The fire's tough.
And come out on the other side.
I know.
So, you know, sometimes I would regret that I didn't hang in there longer. But on the other hand, I think I've been doing this for the last, you know, 21 years, and this is my niche as America's Minister of Encouragement, and so that's what I try to do.
And you do. You've made us laugh. Okay, you didn't ever tell us. You said that your favorite thing to do, to talk about, would be the church stories. Well, do you have a favorite church story?
Oh, there's a bunch of them in those hospital visitation. Brother Dennis, it'd be so nice if you would go see my brother, Jim. I said, well, ma'am, I've been up there 3 times. Well, they didn't see you. His family didn't see you while I was there. Well, they would love to see you. I'm going, help me, Jesus. The staff's been there, I've been there. Then the next Sunday, here she comes again. Brother Dennis, be so nice. I said, I've been there. So do I get to go eat after church with my family? No, I go back to Glenwood Hospital in West Monroe. Can't find any of the family. You know, get on the speaker. Where the Redbird, Bluebird volunteers work, I've been there, so I know how to flipped on the whole PA system for the whole hospital. This is Brother Dennis, Brother Dennis. I'm looking for the Jim's family. You know, where are you? I mean, I looked everywhere. I know every visitation room, waiting room. I even went back in the alley where people sneak a smoke. When I was out there, I almost wanted to light up. You know what I mean? I didn't light up, ma'am. I didn't light up, but I felt like it. Finally, I go up there to ICU, CCU, hey you, and I'm up there, and there he is, tubes up his nose. I've been there several times, and I know it wasn't right, but I took a card, and he was out of it, comatose. But I prayed, because that's the last thing you lose your hearing last. So I prayed genuinely. Then I put on the card, I was here. Put it right underneath that tube on his nose right there. I didn't really, but I wanted to. Yeah, church, you know, and baptism, more stuff can go wrong in baptism. You know, water down your waders or put them under and the water goes over the glass. And you know, then water gets on the choir robes. And Brother Ness, my robe had spots on it. I went, it was just water. It had chlorine in it. Oh. You know, and I'm going, oh, help me. I said, well, one day God will separate the spotted ones from the striped ones or whatever, you know. Go back and read the Old Testament. But you know, just church people and church stories and family. People love that. And so when I tell a story of my family or church, all of a sudden it may remind them of something they hadn't thought about in years, which makes it funny. Like if I brought up right now those Sucrep boxes.
I can see
my
them.
mama we had Sucrep boxes. We didn't have any throat lozenges, but we had bobby pins in there. And she'd take a bobby pin and just clean your ears with a bobby pin. I said, Mama, well, you know, I said, doctor said you shouldn't put anything in your ear. Well, doctors, their ears are dirty too. You know, well, when I do that, somebody there, like today when I'm speaking to seniors, you know, they'll go, I hadn't thought about it. We had a Sucrep box. And all of a sudden we bond over a Sucrep box.
That's right, that's right.
Or just things like that when people, I help them capture a memory, you know, and that's good to them. And if I was a singer, you know, if I sing a song that they loved, that was their grandpa's favorite song, all of a sudden there's a connection. They're going, that was my grandpa's favorite song.
Right.
And I love that guy that sang it too. He's really good. Well, he might be good, he might not be good, but he sang your song, so
and that's a memory.
They love him forever. And then when he comes back for another concert, we got our tickets. You know. So sometimes I wish I was a singer.
Oh, Dennis Swanberg.
Maybe they'd buy more tickets.
Yes. I think that God has I know He has an incredible plan for the rest of your life. You are making us laugh, you're making us think, you're helping us to really grab hold of lots of truths in life. So thank you for your candor today.
Well, thank you.
Transparency and honesty, and I am excited to.
Well, hey, if I can help out, check out my website.
There you go.
DennisSwanberg.com. That's a booger bear, isn't it? Dennis Swanberg, and Swanberg is a mouthful.
Yes.
Swanberg. I've been called Schweinberger, Schulenberger. I answered anything.
But you've got some DVDs that we can slip into our. Whatever we slip them into.
Yeah, one of my latest DVDs. It's pretty funny.
Yeah. What's it called?
It's called Time to Laugh at Mud Creek. It was at Mud Creek Baptist Church, Hendersonville, North Carolina. We had 2,000 people there.
Wow.
I mean, they were in the choir loft and it's electric.
Awesome.
They egged me on.
Oh.
And it just was so good. Usually a DVD is like 50 minutes, but I told Laurie, let's just give them the whole thing. It's like an hour and 15 minutes.
Wow. So they can go to your website, get DVDs, get your book, Planting Shade.
Planting Shade Trees.
Planting Shade Trees. So Dr. Dennis Swanberg has blessed us today, viewers. I direct you to his website to get more information about him. And so I thank you once again so much for being here with us today.
Thank y'all for having me.
And thank you, viewers, for joining us today. Coming up next, we have Dr. Dennis Swanberg, who is going to be sharing some great stories and maybe some inspiration for you to learn from and to hear. So don't go away. Here he comes, coming up. So glad that you're with us today. Coming up, we have Dr. Dennis Swanberg sharing his heart with you, so stay with us.
Oh, but I love my seniors. I am a senior, you know. I'm a senior. I love my seniors. And I get tickled at us, how we are sometime. You know, I remember I was a pastor for 24 years. Did y'all know that? I pastored for 24 years. In 1995, I left the pastorate to do this full time. Free at last, free at last. Thank God I'm free at last. I've been to the mountaintop. I'm not afraid anymore. But I remember when I pastored, you know, I had to do counseling, and I wasn't the best counselor. I admit it. I just wasn't good at it. You know, they'd come to me and want to talk, you know, share their heart. You know, I'd just say, stop it. You know, quit doing that. You know, they wanted to talk, and I just... So then some of the ladies in the church said, he's just not sensitive. He is not sensitive. You know, my son-in-law came in, and he was not sensitive. Well, he was running around with another woman. I just told him to stop it. What do you want me to tell him? Just sort of ease off. Little by little or something. I mean, you know. And I admit it, when I was a pastor, when I was early days, you know, when I was in my early 20s and I was a pastor and someone would come forward, I had not been trained properly. And they'd come up and I'd hold their hand. You know, pastor, how we hold your hand, and we bob. Have you noticed how we bob? We bob. Even Charles, he bobs a little bit. Just, you know, when you got the call of God in your life, you got a holy bob. Yeah. And so they were coming, they just share stuff with me. You know, I was 25 years old. I'm going, and I know I wasn't thinking, you know, how I looked, my body language. When they'd open up, I'd go, good night. Woo! Are you kidding? I mean, you know, you learn not to do that. So my next little bit, we're going to still laugh a little bit, but I want to bring you a little message. Okay, is that okay? You're going, well, you know, just don't put us to sleep. Oh, I'm not going to. You know, in doing what I do, I've had a lot of people help me along the way. Chuck Swindoll says, if you see a turtle sitting on top of a fence post, you know he didn't get there by himself. Isn't that the truth? And I've had a lot of people be good to me. I've had a lot of people plant shade trees for me. And my grandparents have planted shade trees for me. And, you know, my great-grandpa, when he came from Sweden, he planted some shade trees around the old house. Yesterday, I was in Austin, and I took my mom out to the cemetery. We went out to her old home place that her great-grandpa from Sweden, you know, bought the land, built the house. We went out there and took a look at it. But here's what's neat. When my grandpa was 5 years old, my great-grandpa planted shade trees around the house. He planted shade trees that he never sat under, because when he turned 40, he took sick and died. We have a letter in Swedish. We don't know what he died from, but he knew he was sick, and he just took sick and died at age 40. But he planted shade trees that he never sat under, but I've sat underneath those shade trees. And that's the blessing, isn't it? When someone plants a blessing for you. And I've been out there, and I've enjoyed those. I mean, when we drove out there yesterday, I mean, the memories just flooded in on my mind. My dad's dad, he came from Sweden when he was 14 years old. We went to drove by his place, and all those shade trees there. And in Texas, what they would do a lot of times, they planted these big old cedar trees in a row on the north side of the house to block that north wind, because there wasn't nothing to block it, to try to block that north wind off the house. And to look at all those big old trees. Man, my grandpa planted shade trees that he never sat under, so to speak, but I've sat underneath them. And they've given me so many stories. My mom and dad, Floyd Leon, Pauline Bernadine, have planted shade trees for me. My dad, on October the 28th, he will be gone from us for 3 years. He died 3 years ago. And, man, he's given me a lot of stories, old Floyd Leon. I mean, he was something else. I mean, my little mama, you know, we talked even yesterday. We took her to Mexican food. She likes Mexican food. And we're sitting there and we're reminiscing about Daddy. And I asked her again, I said, Daddy, Mama, what was he like when y'all dated, you know? And I said, was he aggressive? Yes, he was aggressive. Mother, Deacon Floyd, well, he wasn't always a deacon.
You know, they were married 63 years. 63 years. I said, Mama, did he kiss you on the first date? Right on the mouth. Took my breath away. I asked him where he learned to kiss like that, and he said, siphoning gas. I tell these young couples today, if they want to be married 50 years, they better start siphoning. Most of them don't even know what siphoning is. But my dad's given me a lot of material. They've planted a lot of shade trees for me, especially with their faith. You know, my dad was a strong layman, loved the Lord, but he was a man's man, but he was strong. And there would be times just out of the blue. We're sitting in the den watching television, watching Hullabaloo, you know, or whatever that show was. And my dad would, out of the blue, my dad would go, never forget the death, burial, and resurrection. What, Daddy? The death, burial, and resurrection. Those are pivotal. Okay, Dad. All right, turn the TV back up. You know, I mean, and back then, channel changers were the kids. You know, we had to get up and turn it up or change the channel. But he lived it out. He was a good man of faith. And my little mama, she's given me more material. She's still giving me material, planting shade trees for me as a speaker, entertainer. And she's just a real little woman. She's 5 foot tall, healthy. We were sitting yesterday, and I said, and because I take care of all of her finances, for some reason she feels like she has to tell me everything she does. I said, Mom, you got money. Buy what you want. Well, and we were driving out there to the cemetery. She said, I've got to tell you something. And I thought, what's the matter? I bought some outfits. Well, Mom, that is fine. Alfred Dunner. I said, well, Mom, Alfred Dunner looks good on you. And Alfred Dunner is nice. If you don't have Alfred Dunner, get you some Alfred Dunner. She gets a little blouse. She got the little jacket. And I was helping her shop one time a few years ago, and I said, Mom, how about this jacket? What size is it? I said, it's 18. Well, I can wear it. I don't button anything anymore. And I went, I don't either. But you know, you get the little blouse, you got the jacket, and the breeches are the most awesome because the waist is just elastic, just woo, woo, it's just woo, woo. And that's the best part of Alfred Dunner. I wish he made some men's breeches, just woo, woo, just woo, woo. Just. I love my mama, 86 years old, and so you know we're farm people. But she's not on the farm anymore. I got her an independent living in Austin, Texas, off of Breaker Lane, I-35, at Green Ridge, Buckner, independent, and it's nice. Saltwater swimming pool, nice. And just, whatever she needs. I asked her, I said, Mom, what do you like best about living here? She said, I don't have to prepare food. I don't have to cook it. I don't have to clean it up. Because she cooked her whole life, every meal for Daddy and all of us, you know. And I said, well, Mom, I'm glad you like it. Now, here's the problem with my mama. She's wearing too much talcum powder. I don't know how to get her to back off the talcum powder. But on the farm, we wore a lot of talcum powder because you perspired. And talcum powder absorbs perspiration. In Texas, it gets hot. You perspire. Didn't have air conditioning in that old farmhouse, but I've got her in independent living. It's air conditioned. She don't need that much talcum powder. And this last Christmas, she loves to mash the taters because she's got the hanging down part on her arms, and she can just sort of, it's like a holy shimmy, just a. But the talcum powder was poofing up and poofing out like a crop duster. It just, and the talcum powder like a cloud just fell on our food. It just looked like powdered donuts. My wife is she's from well-to-do family, and she's going, oh my gosh, I can't, oh my. And my boys, they're 33 and 30, they're just going, ooh. Can I tell y'all something? You cannot taste it. It keeps you regular, but you can't taste it. You know, there's times I'm on the road all the time, and there's times I feel like I'm a little, I'll just go into a CVS or a Walgreens, go down to aisle 7. I don't need the whole thing. I'll just take the lid and just sort of poof it on my finger. I'm good to go for another week. I'm ministering to somebody. Oh, gosh. But my family, they've planted a lot of shade trees for me. And, shade trees are important. But they've also given me faith, and they've given me values. They've given me good stories about my grandparents that we can talk about, we can laugh about, And spiritually, it's so important to plant shade trees for people. In these days, we need to keep planting shade trees for others. Remember that phrase, planting shade trees that you may never sit under, but others will? That's what my book is all about. It's my new book. Dr. Stanley and David Jeremiah both endorsed my little book. I'm so glad they did. Dr. Stanley bought 1,000 of them. I guess he's giving them to his top donors so they'll plant a forest or something maybe. But each chapter has a different tree. For instance, like there's a chapter in there about capturing a memory. My grandpa and I, we would walk down the fence row, and we'd done it many times, but he would sometimes he'd just get up and go, come on, where are we going, Grandpa? We're going to go walk the fence rows. Make sure the fences are all right. So we were walking the fence rows. But I would notice as a boy how the tree had grown around the barbed wire. You've been there, hadn't you? Grandpa showed me there's some trees that my great-grandpa had laid a bottle, and the tree had grown around the bottle. There were a tree that had come through an old rusty gas can right up through it. I guess my great-grandpa had put that over a little, and now it's just wrapped around it. Sometimes shade tree planters, we need to capture a memory. Memories are important. Remember how Jesus said, I want you to repent. I want you to remember. I want you to repent, and I want you to return to me in Revelation. Sometimes we need to remember. We need to remember those that have gone before us. We're reminded, Revelation 14:13 says, blessed are they that die in the Lord, their works follow after them. You see, their faith is still a shade tree for me today. What my great-grandpa did, we found out that my great-grandpa, Aaron Johnson, was licensed to the gospel ministry in 1890 or 1898 or something like that. And we found his license, and we never knew that. And then when he died at age 40, we found a letter by Pastor Oleander in Swedish and finally got it translated. And he was talking about my great-grandpa, what a good man he was, that he loved Jesus, and he was licensed to preach, and he wanted to preach one day, but he never got to preach. And then in the letter it says, he was like a giant oak tree that fell in the midst of a storm. Too early in life he passed away. And then the next line said, who will take his place? And when I read that, I said, I will. He never got to preach. He was licensed, but never got to. And I speak about 140 events a year. And I know you may not call it preaching. I mean, a lot of times when I preach somewhere every Sunday, there will always be someone when I out in the hallway when they're walking out and they're shaking my hand, they'll go, Brother Dennis, I enjoyed your thing. I said, well, I don't really call it preaching either. I just sort of share a little bit. But he planted a shade tree for me, didn't he? In my office, I have a picture of him, and I have a picture of that license underneath him. And every time I'm at home at our office, I look at that and I go, I will fulfill his dream. I look forward to meeting Aaron Johnson one day. There have been people that planted shade trees for you. They opened a door for you. They put in a good word for you. They gave you a job. They were nice to you. Or they were nice to your family. They were good to your kids. There's been people that have planted shade trees in your life, and you're here because you're a shade tree planter. Charles and his wife, their family, they're shade tree planters. Why do they do this? Why do they work so hard on all this, over a tradition, over a period of time, and it's growing? And because they're shade tree planters. They want to plant a shade tree for you to be blessed by. Jeremiah is my favorite one. I have him in the book, chapter 32. He planted a shade tree when he bought the land at Anathoth because he knew that one day houses and fields and vineyards and shade trees, if you will again be planted in the land. And he bought the piece of land 70 years later when the Babylonians were defeated by the Persians. When they came back to Jerusalem, to Anathoth, they had a place to live. Why? Because Jeremiah had bought the field at Anathoth. As far as we know, he was never benefited by that piece of land. But don't you know it was pretty special when they came back and they found that document in that earthen jar that needed to last a long time. They took it out and they unraveled it and they saw his signature or the signet of his ring pressed in wax, and it was theirs. Pretty awesome, isn't it? Steve Green sings that song. How's it go? But may he always find us faithful. Find us faithful. I was out there at a product table and I saw Gold City's table there. My heart just sort of leaped, I love Gold City. And Daddy, Tim, has just always been a good friend. And I remember when I'd go on their bus sometime because I know them, But I'd get up there and Tim always had that front seat on the passenger side, and there would be his Bible, where he'd have his quiet time, his Bible study time. Well, the boys are still singing, they're still going, still doing. Why? Because he planted a shade tree. Every now and then he'll sing with them, but not all the time. But he planted a shade tree that he may never sit under one day, but they'll keep on singing. And that's what it's all about, isn't it? When I was listening to, he was just singing a while ago, Larnell. I've known Larnell a long, long time, old Kentucky boy, and can sing. And man, when I heard him sing, first when I was out in the hallway, I thought it was a tape, that it was a tape when he was younger. And it was Larnell right now. He's getting older. But he's still cranking it. Think of all the places that he's been over the years. When I was working on my doctorate, I told him this. When I was writing my doctorate, my thesis, I've got a doctorate, Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary. I locked myself into a hotel room for 2 days. I put on my headset and I listened to Larnell for 2 days on my headset, his different CDs. And I was just writing, inspired. Little did he know that he was sort of planting a shade tree for me, because when you're ADD, you have to have other stuff going on while you're writing. So I had him going on, just a singing. But he didn't know that. Just think how many people have been blessed when you hear Gold City or when you hear Larnell or we hear this one or that one, and the Nelsons. You hear these groups. And they get on the bus and they leave and they wonder, well, did we touch any heart or whatever? You have no clue about the shade trees that have been planted. I want to encourage you to be a shade tree planter. And I want to tell you this last story. It's 5 till we got to eat. I'm hungry. I went to Baylor University because Marshall Edwards, who was my high school football chaplain, took me up there. He was 32 years old. He was responsible for me coming to Jesus when I was 17 there in Austin, Texas. Well, he had gone to Baylor, so he took me up to Baylor. And the next thing you know, he got me into Baylor and everything, you know. And next thing I know, I'm there to play baseball. And I had to take the ACT test. I made a 16, and they said, well, that's not high enough at Baylor. So I took it again, made another 16. But when you put those two together, 32. Talking 32. Well, I had to be on probation, and I had to take remedial English, and I had to get a tutor. Miss Anderson tutored me for 1 whole year on that Harbrace Hodge grammar book. But I'm here to tell you that I learned it. You can learn. People can learn more than what they think they can. I learned it. And then I majored in Greek. And I majored in religion. I got two degrees. I went to Southwestern, got my master's. I got my doctorate. And what am I doing today? Being funny. But I tell people, if I'm not standing on the solid rock of Jesus Christ and grounded with good doctrine, I could be like a wave tossed to and fro out there. I've even told some churches, hey, let me preach. Let me do more preaching. I can preach. I pastored 24 years. And I said, and then I said, Lord, let me be more like Charles Stanley and David Jeremiah. I could do it. He goes, I want you to be funny. I went, well, what if people wonder if I have any depth? You know what he told me? He said, I know if you got depth or not. I went, okie dokie. That's you that was laughing. You got that little high laugh. I like it. You sort of remind me of my mama. Come out to the lobby, we'll hug. I'll give you a 3/4 hug. Yes, sir. In ministry, side body hug is safest, but I used to say if you're 65 and older, I'll give you a frontal, but now that I'm 62, I'm upping it to 70. Okay. But anyhow, here's the rest of the story real quick. Marshall Edwards, my father in the ministry, he lives in Blowing Rock, North Carolina now, and he lived in Covington, Georgia. He went to Newton County High School. He had an appointment to West Point. He had a full scholarship to Harvard, turned them both down to go to Baylor University to prepare for the gospel. His daddy said, if you do that, I won't give you 1 penny, and his dad never did. It's just a sad story. But Marshall got to Baylor, and he worked 3 jobs, and it wasn't going to be enough to pay for it. He didn't know what he was going to do, but a check came in, and just enough to pay for that semester. Next semester, same thing happened. Next semester, same thing happened. Freshman year, sophomore year, junior year, senior year, never knew who it was. A few weeks before he took me to Baylor, when he was 32 years old, he got a letter from Mary Leila Ellington. Mary Leila Ellington was his senior English teacher. He had her for 1 semester his senior year. She wrote him and said, Marshall, I was up in my attic. I came across these old canceled checks that I sent to Baylor. I was never going to tell you, but God told me I needed to tell you, so I'm doing it because he told me to tell you, so I'm telling you. And I want you to know you're the greatest investment I've ever made in all my life. Marshall got on the phone and called her. She said hello. He couldn't speak, and he talks more than I do. There was a long pause, and she said, is this Marshall? He said, yes, ma'am. She said, Marshall, you're the greatest investment I've ever made. Mary Leila Ellington never married. Marshall asked her one time, he said, Miss Ellington, did you ever have a boyfriend or a romance? Did you ever come close to getting married? She said, Marshall, I never had a date, but you're my adopted son. Mary Leila Ellington never made more than $5,000 a year as a school teacher. But she planted a shade tree, didn't she, for Marshall Edwards? Here's the rest of the story. Page 2. Paul Harvey. When Marshall took me and my dad in his yellow LTD up to Baylor University, little did I know that Mary Leila Ellington was sitting in the back seat with me, wasn't she? Wasn't she? When I was there taking the ACT test, she was there, wasn't she? She probably said, if I'd have had him for one semester, he had made a 24. When I graduated from Baylor, she was there. When I went to seminary and got both degrees, she was there. When I married my little honey love, my Laurie, my sugar babe, my woman, she was there. When both my boys were born, they were there. She was there. When I had my first television show, Swan's Place in Gold City, remember being at Daniel? Y'all were on Swan's Place. She was there. And I'm going to tell you something. She's sitting somewhere out here today, isn't she? She planted a shade tree that she never, ever sat under. But I have, haven't I? When Marshall Edwards took me to Baylor University that day, it changed my world. Swanberg boy had never gone to college before. My daddy was raised a sharecropper. It changed my world. And when I get to heaven, one of the first people I'm going to look up and I'm going to give her a frontal is Mary Leila Ellington. God's a shade tree planter. He planted a shade tree for Zacchaeus just so he could see a friendly face. He planted a shade tree for Nathaniel just so he could sit under it. He planted a shade tree for a mustard tree so that we preachers would have a good sermon illustration. And he planted a shade tree on the hill Calvary. And he planted a shade tree by the river of life in heaven for all of his shade tree planters to enjoy. If for some reason something happens to me tonight and I'm not able to come back tomorrow, I'll promise you this much. I'll see you underneath that shade tree in heaven. Because you're here today, this week, because you're a shade tree planter. And I pray God's richest blessings on you as you continue to plant and as He gives the increase.
Oh, I hope you enjoyed a wonderful time with Dr. Dennis Swanberg. I know I did. I hope he was a blessing to you. Thanks for watching Good Life 45. You know we are where hope happens, so keep watching and God bless your day.